Hello everyone. Thank you for being here with us, and thank you to Up To Date Festival for having me and for having us and for hosting these talks, because I think it's very important, and I really love the angle that you picked for these conversations. The conference is called Do We Really Care? And our conversation talks about environmental responsibility and asks the question whether the festival industry, thank you, it just appeared magically in front of my eyes when I started speaking. Does the festival industry even bother about its impact on the environment? We have wonderful guests with me today. It's Paulina Żaczek from Granko agency.
Hello everyone, nice to meet you. Thanks for having me.
Bartłomiej Arendarski from Fraunhofer Institute. Halvard Müller from Monument. And Grzegorz Stanisławski from Electrum. And my name is Misia Furtak. I'm a musician, but I also happen to be the head of the Polish chapter of Music Declares Emergency, and that's the context why I'm here. We have Grzegorz opening this panel for us with a case, maybe study, or like a bit of an introduction. So I'll give the floor to Grzegorz.
Thank you very much. The topics of conference, this is the questions. But I think it's very important to discuss about the real value which is important to create from culture. The basic question, what is the difference between Norway and Russia? Especially today, this question, it's a very, very serious. Norway is very nice people. I like so much also Norway music, and that was my inspiration. Why? Because Norway, exactly in the same time, they start to explore oil and gas from completely scratch, without knowledge, without experience. But they start and they create situation when the gas and oil was almost 41% and 14% in the gross domestic product. I don't know what is the current situation in Russia. I don't know what today is the situation in Russia. You know what's going on. But the question is, what is the role of culture? What is our role? What is the role of artists to create soft power? Because technology should be for the human, not for the state, not for the exploration, not for the pollution, not for the destroyed of Earth. Technology should be for the human. This is very important. Culture is for the human. Music is for the human. I don't know what is the decarbonizations of the show business. Doesn't matter. But culture, this is the key elements to create real influence on the politics. Who know about Sami people? Who know about Jeńcy? You know, we discuss. Who know about Łemki? This is very important. We should come back to the real core of our culture. Music, this is the story. Music, this is also important aspect about our vision, about our dream, how to change the economy, how to change energy sector. This is very important. In our concept, our friends also in Electrum, we always discuss about technology as a tools to change, to improve the world. This is very important. This is basic aspect which we should remember about that. That's the also question about difference between Norway and Russia. Let's start about that. Environment and justice. This is very difficult and part of the environment racism. Why? Because rich country, rich civilization, they located pollution to the other country. That's the problem. When we discuss about panel PV production or technology production, we should be sure that world Earth is one. Not located this technology, dirty technology in the other civilization, which should pay much more pollutions because we need exploration, we need access, also to show business. This is very important. That was the first lesson of Norway when they start explore gas and oil. But who give this lesson to politics? Sami. Let's come back also to the history. This is gross domestic product per capita in Norway. They start from scratch, from zero. These brave people, they create the smart economy, the smart country. We know what is the day, Statoil, but today is the name of Equinor. Why? Because they create innovation. They use the technology, but they also use stabilization factor, culture. Culture, culture. This is very important. And what happened at the beginning of this process? That was one of the important protests of Sami people, the local people which they live on the north part of Scandinavia. Norway, this is almost 350,000 people, Sami, and Sweden is almost 300 or 250, 75 or almost 100,000 people in Finland, also in Russia, in Karelia. And these people in the beginning of the 70, they create culture, civil movement against of the exploration land, against of the using technology, against us human. This is very important movement. And they create like the Detsky camp, that was the like Woodstock or something that was very important pillar of the culture. And can you imagine? That was the independent movement, and even they create the independent parliament of the Sami people. And the visitors, 7,500 people from almost 20 nations, they visit this, like Woodstock. And that was very important soft power which changed the philosophy and the politics of Norway explorations policy. And the famous fund of the next generation, which is valued today with 1,300,000,000,000, congratulations, it's very nice. That was set up in 1996 as an effect of this soft power. I like this photo and this history. That was the famous protest, Alta. Alta is a river, very important for Sami people. I like this photo, this brave man, which protect the land. And these people, they occupied almost 45, 50 years before Greta Thunberg. They occupied the capital of Norway, Oslo. And also they occupied almost 3 weeks, women from Sami people. They occupied office of prime minister. And they receive real impact how to explore Norwegian land. And they use what? Soft power. That was the logo of Sami people, which was formulated that time. This is very interesting. And Alta legacy, this is today one of the pillar of the Norway philosophy. And it was the pillar because they also have huge influence to change also the constitutions of Norway. So many NGOs was set up by Sami people. And you don't remember, in 1980, these two brave people, they win Eurovision, and they use on the whole world very special way of song, joiku. That was the song. Joiku, this is the style, but this song was about nature, about ecology. This is very famous Norway song. Maybe at the end of the panel we start singing now. Do you know the joiku? Yeah, and that was very important because that was part of the mass music culture. It was not only niche like the ethno, yeah, but that was most important aspect. They stay very popular, yeah, also with this dress. I'm a little disappointed. Our friends from Norway, they have no this dress today, but I'm not sorry. Yeah, and my hero, this is Mari Boini. I love Mari Boini. I know this music very well. She's ambassador of Sami people, and she's like the shaman. She's like the magician. and she creates so many protest songs against of the exploration, oil and gas. And she is one of the fundamental active of the green energy. I love Marii Bojni because Marii Bojni also create completely new vision. She integrate this music with Jan Garbarek and very famous I Took Up the Rune, and you know that was the very important culture movement. And Marii Bojni, she promote this culture, this style of jojku, which is a story about Sami people. And she promote also this, let's say, green energy revolutions. Yes, because she was against of the stupid explorations of our earth. That's the mother of this soft power. And this is very important, yes, because when we discuss about Norway and Russia, do you know something about Jeńcy? No. Do you know some artists from this region? No. Do you remember such a movement which has influence on the Russian constitutions? No. And a country like Russia, where is the natural monopoly of the energy sector, country like Saudi, Iran, Iraq, they create war. Country like Norway, where is the soft power, culture, and the role of the responsibility of artists, they not create war. They love green energy, they love earth, they love culture, they love music. This is very important difference. And culture and song, jojku, with this story, has huge influence on the politics. This is the best case. And now, this is a time about democratizations of the energy, time about the democratizations of the technology, to not create the pollutions, to not transfer production to the poor people, to poor culture country. And this is also a very important role of artists. Why? Because we should come back to roots, to source, to discuss about a real problem, also from the song. This is very important, especially today, in this war which we have in Ukraine. Come back to the basic function and needs of our culture. And I'm sure if the song will be with real content about the basic aspect, about human aspect, that will be very important message which create this soft power like Sami, Marii Bojni, and other Norwegian hero. That's my little introduction to provocate our discussion about the role of this culture to not only create the niche as an ethno, but also create real content, real protest song, real protest culture to not discuss about we really carry, but how we influence on the politics to create our world better and technology as a center to help our civilization, but not against human. Thank you so much.
Thank you for this brilliant presentation. I'll ask Halvard, because I mean you were brought to the spot, whether you wanted or not. I'll start with you, whether you could comment on this.
I don't really know where to start. So, thank you for...
I saw you making notes, so maybe from
yeah,
the notes.
I did. Thank you for the history lesson. I'm sure I learned a lot of this back in school, but it's been a few years. But what you're saying is not just a historical thing, it's also very day relevant. Because I don't know if you are also aware that the Sami people have again reignited their soft power, and that is due to the next generation of energy evolution, windmills. Even though Norway is rich on hydropower, that resource is limited. And Alta came to a stop with the regulation and the building of hydropower energy. From that came to a stop due to the uprising and the Sami people. What's happening now is that the next generation of electricity comes from the wind. So windmills have been built on Sami land. And recently, I think the Sami people marked the day where there had been 500 days in demonstration against this, because this has been done without their consent and without any consideration on how this inflicted on the Sami rights. So again, we saw the Sami people occupying the government's offices. Again, we saw them being removed by the police in a soft and gentle way, though. But again, we're seeing that the way the larger society is in need of energy also is in conflict with the fundamental rights of smaller groups. And again, it's with the Sami people. So yeah, we're still there, and we're still in need of energy, and our search for energy still is in conflict with special groups, minority groups' interests and rights.
You're right, but important aspect, that's the conflict. But this is not the conflict, this is dialogue. This is very important. There are people which they have this, land, like Sami people, they discuss about the future. Okay, but this is very important. Did you know such a case from Russia? No. This is very important.
No. Never heard of it.
Exactly. That's the value. Even this is dialogue, and this is very important. In Sami people, wind, this is like the god. And Joiku, there's so many songs about wind. In the very famous I Took Up the Rune, that's a song about wind. That's the reason why the Sami, they protest also against all that.
Again, I must admit I'm a bit embarrassed, because you know much more about even Norwegian music on that part of the culture than I do. Or maybe I know about it, but it's a bit more in my periphery. I'm more on the electronic music scene and techno scene. But also for that scene, I think the environmental aspects, and to this topic, do we really care? Well, there's a genuine discussion to be had about that. And my thought in preparing for this conversation was, what are the greater lines and what are the smaller lines, and how do we fit in what we do? So Monument has been around for more than 10 years. We organize club events, techno nights mostly, but also festivals. And the interesting thing is that we have a large international community of followers. And last year, when we had the festival up in the mountains in Norway, we saw people coming from 45 countries across the world. So people came from Japan, from Taiwan, from Australia, from the US. And they come by airplane, obviously they do. So that's not very sustainable in itself. But then we also have a huge digital crowd following us, and that's something we are elaborating in combination or in cooperation with also Up To Date Festival, and also some partners from Portugal and Lithuania through an EU-sponsored program. Because we, by definition in Norway, we are the periphery of things. So if people want to come to what we do, they need to travel far. And by itself, that's not a sustainable thing to do. So how can we still deliver what we do, cultural content, musical experience, how can we bring that out to people without people having to travel across the globe to experience that? So that is something we are investigating in this EU-funded project, which is going to run over 4 years.
Okay. And do you have any recommendations at this point that you send out to the people traveling to your festival with like the best way to commute, or like what is the way for here and now that you approach this program?
Absolutely, we do. So, but what we do, we do some smaller things, which is what we can do, and then we recommend, and then we have a direction for where we want to go and how we want to be perceived. And we try to live the way we want to be perceived, because without doing that, this wouldn't be real, and it would just be kind of trying to greenwash what we do. So we encourage everyone to ride together, to take the slower route. If people come by car, go together. We had people coming to our festival by bike from Germany, which I think is really inspiring. Yeah. And also we set up common transportation. So we encourage people to go by train, and then we set up buses so that people travel together. So that's one of the things that we can do. And at the festival, I mean, a festival is electrified, We take most of the power from off the grid, literally. So it's green energy. It comes from a power station right up the valley. But then there's a limitation in that energy. So we need to supplement that with the generator. And highest up on my list is to be able to make investments in replacing that generator into a cable. But as you may be aware, Norway is a very expensive country and everything costs a lot of money. So we're doing things in steps. We're hoping that next year we can electrify, totally electrify with green energy the whole festival operation, and that we only will need a generator as a backup in case of bad weather or a power cut. Other things that we do is we encourage people to bring their own cups, because we don't want plastic waste. It's a small thing. It's a symbolic thing.
It makes a difference.
But we have our own branded cups. You can cling it to or hook it to your belt, carry it with you, and you get cheaper beers, and you don't produce plastic waste if you use that. Also, we try to build our own infrastructure instead of renting, because renting, say, a bar, which we did last year, it wasn't too expensive to rent the bar construction in itself, but transporting it to the location and back actually cost more than renting the bar itself. And also, it's no longer there. And the transportation, it emits CO2 and whatnot. So we try to be clever in our choices. We don't have too much money to put into it, so we need to do it stepwise. But we have the direction set, and we're deadly committed to doing this. And even, interestingly, sorting of waste is a very strong signal indicator. Do you sort your waste here in Poland?
Yes.
You do? Okay, we do too. In Oslo we do. But where we have our festival, which is 2 hours away from Oslo, they don't. So how do we solve that? Well, actually we cooperate with someone who does this by robotics. So the audience at our festival, they react to what they see, which is, why don't you sort your waste? And then we need to explain to them, actually we do, but not here. So we have machines and robots who does that. So in most ways, we try to put sustainability into what we do, and we are very environmentally conscious in the food choices, the way we bring people to the festival, the footmark we leave. Actually, that's also a very important thing, because it's an outdoor festival, which is being held at a field, and the field normally grows grass, which is being fed to the cows. So we don't want cigarette butts or anything, no broken glass, nothing there. So we're very thorough in how we treat the waste and cigarettes and smoking, for example.
Yeah.
So, and I can speak on and on how we do this.
I mean, it's really nice to listen to it because it's a brilliant case, and it also shows that the people who come to your festival are also well educated and want to work with you and sort of are like one tribe following.
Yeah, this is what they expect.
And
they clearly express their expectations on how they want this festival to be perceived and whether they want to be part of it or not as a result of that.
Yeah, because I mean, I have different experiences with that, but we also, as a small collective, organized a festival called Tchnienia in Poland, in Bieszczady, also in the mountains, really remote. And the people that came to the festival, they were very respectful, and they also expected it, but it's not something that you can take for granted. I mean, especially over here, at least that's my experience. But it was a zero waste festival. People cleaned up after themselves, and they also took their cigarette butts in the little pocket holder that they got from us, and so on and so forth. Another festival that I know that definitely in Poland works with this is in Brzmienia in Lublin. I played there last year, and we also got a branded bottle from them. And they didn't have any plastic bottles. They only had water jugs, which you could refill. And all artists got their refillable water bottles. I mean, over here, I was absolutely, stunned yesterday when I saw that not only Up To Date uses, upcycled clothing for their merch, but also you can bring your own clothing and get it branded at the festival for free. I think, genius will be one of my favorite cases for the Polish territory. Do you, Paulina, know or have any cases out of your experience that would be like a good practice from Poland?
Well, yeah, actually, you already mentioned it. So we are the festival that introduced a new strategy, ecological strategy this year, and one of the the highest and the biggest thing to do that the Up To Date Festival did was to resign from merch, which is a big, bold move for a festival in case of budget and funding. So and this was also very warmly appreciated by the public, and basically I'm also wearing one of the merch items. I'm a big fan of the Deluxe series, but this is only one of the steps that the festival is doing. The festival also cut the transportation by plane to Poland, and due to the location, it's maybe not so similar, but a bit, because Bialystok doesn't have a good connection with rest of the world. You have to go to Warsaw and then take a train. And nowadays, where we live in a life where people don't really want to, maybe put a lot of work to get somewhere. It's quite a struggle, but the public that comes to the festival is a public that really loves it. So we encouraged public this year through our website, because I also do communications for the festival. I run my agency. I'll mention it as well later, because we also do a little steps with eco strategy. But we coming back to Up To Date, we put some tips on how to get to the festival by train, not taking a car, because usually the public was taking a car, and we wanted to encourage them to use a zbiorką, so to get transport. So I think it's quite weird to say this here, because I'm really proud of the strategy that the festival is introducing. So there's a lot of information on the website, and I encourage you to read into it. Also, from my experience as an agency owner, I have one of the few agencies in electronic music in Poland called Granko, and we try. I mostly represent Polish artists, and I take care of their bookings in Poland and abroad. And I strongly try to persuade bookers the bookers of the clubs, so promoters, to propose connections by train for the international connections. And at the beginning, at the first steps of the artist joining the agency, they receive a form where I ask some questions about their goals, etc. And one of them is, if you had to choose a longer road, but it would be greener, would you do it? And everyone answered yes, and we are all on the same page. Because transportation in electronic music is really a huge factor in carbon footprint. So, from my experience working in the music industry, at one point it became very important to me to also look at the ecological aspects of it. So artists often take trains, even though it's sometimes really not comfortable, because trains in Poland are not always the highest quality. And some of artists are playing vinyls, so it's quite heavy to handle. But we have similar way of looking at life, so they do it if it's possible. Especially it's quite important for me for international bookings, because it very often happens that for bookings very close to for countries very close to Poland, I receive proposals for airplane, which you can easily take a train from, let's say, Poznań to Berlin, which is 3 hours.
3 hours.
Yeah. Or I was living in Krakow for 17 years. I moved to Warsaw recently, and I handled some bookings for. I was doing PR for a club in Kraków, and when we were doing parties, international agents were pushing travels from Berlin to Kraków by plane, even though there was a direct train from Berlin to Kraków that takes around 7 hours. They were pushing and they're still doing that because I sometimes do bookings as well for some parties. And it takes like 6 hours to fly, and you have to go through Vienna, and so you have to change. And they don't even propose this to their artists, the option to take a train, because I often ask artists, why didn't you choose the train? They didn't know. So I also try to push the train transportation when it's possible.
We'll get back to that, but I wanted to ask Bartłomiej because a couple technological solutions were mentioned, and I wanted to ask you whether technology is like, you know, an ally or an enemy in all of this conversation, and if it's an ally and can help in, you know, where we all want to be headed. Where do you see the possibilities, the options?
I mean, technology is for us, and not we are for the technology. So we need to use it in a way, in a clever way. Technology is available, so for sure, I will back to the example of Grzegorz, which he brought on the beginning of why Norwegian society is so successful and compared to the Russian society. In this particular case, they start maybe from the same level. In the other cases, for sure not, because it's a very, let's say, democratic society in Norway, which is not the case in Russia. But the point is that they start with the oil and gas industry and selling the resources. Norwegian right away invest in the other technologies, like in the renewable technologies, mostly on the hydro. So they are now up to 90% renewable and consumption over 70%. Russian didn't do it. So I'm not sure if it's this just the case, but could be. So the technology plays an important role for that. Also, I will maybe combine this with the statistic for the world happiness level. So the most happiest countries are the Scandinavian countries. Finland, I think, #1 now. Norway also in top 5. Sweden, Denmark. And there is a correlation. All those countries are having very high amount of renewable energies into the power system, so the technology. Poland is, I think, on 39th place, growth in last year's 10%, so we still have a potential. Maybe if we build more renewables, we will be more happy.
What a way to put it.
Yeah, but the technology, that maybe I will make a question here. You remember, I don't know, some of you, 30 years, 40 years ago, when you go to the concert and you have a ballad love song, you were cheering the band with the lighters, lighting the lighters. How you do it now? With the cell phones. Why? Because that time the lighters were cheap and available technology. Today you have cell phones, which are available and quite cheap. So we have in Poland available technology, wind, PV. Why don't we invest in it? We are sticking with the old technologies, coal industry. Why we are blocking these initiatives to make a technology available? Of course, there are challenges. We used to have a very interesting project together with Electrum. Was very successful in the end, was recognized by the ISGAN Award of Excellence in Vancouver. So this is the International Association for Smart Grid Network. Why it happens? Because we address not only technological challenges, but also the economic and for sure the social aspects. Mm-hmm. So if you ask people, are you for renewable energies? I think like 95%, maybe 99% say, yes, I am for that. But if you tell them, but this renewable will stay in your garden, then this suddenly decrease. So because they are afraid about it, they don't know about it. This is classical NIMBY effect, not in my backyard. That's why in this project what we address also the acceptance issues. So how to talk to people about the challenges of renewable energies, not only about the advantages, but also about the disadvantages. So you need to be very transparent about it, and you need to involve people in this process. So what we did, we developed kind of virtual reality-based platform in order to visualize the upcoming technology, which could stay in your near neighborhood, in order to show you don't have to be afraid about it. You can visualize it because for purpose, if you don't know something, you are afraid about it. Best example, refugees. They are against because they don't know, different culture, we are afraid what they breed. Some of people saying they are bringing some diseases or so. We will not go into the details about this. But so this is the point. So you need to bring people with you and to be part of it. So the technology is for us. So we don't have to be afraid about the technology, and we need to use it in a clever way.
Yeah. The project you're mentioning, is it still running? Like, can it be to see what you just mentioned, to see the online platform you mentioned?
Yeah, this is possible. I mean, the project is officially, it was founded project, was an international project. It's finished already, but we are working on the further, let's say, the follow-up projects.
Yeah.
Yesterday we have a very beautiful event together with companies from Bialystok, with Electrum as well, about integration of storage. So those renewable energies, they are very volatile. Not always you have a sun, not always we have a wind. So we need to stabilize them in some way. That's why you can use the storage for that. Also, I see the very big potential for storage technologies in the music industry. If you make festivals, you have a backup diesel generators, you can have also the container storage, mobile technologies for that. Which could be also charged with the renewable energy. This is the problem, for example, in the cities where you don't have enough, let's say, in the main square, for example, of the city, you don't have the capacity to make a really like a high load, to include their high loads. So mostly they are the generators, diesel generators, producing also a lot of noise. So the storage will be much quieter and much sustainable solutions for that. Maybe this is gonna be the next project which we can start it. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely much needed. Grzegorz, I have actually two questions to you now, because one thing is, all of this makes sense. Still, most festivals and the industry, especially the big commercial festivals, are doing it the old way. And thinking about this, and also about what you were saying in the beginning about the cultures, which actually is, we should learn from them and take that example of, you know, the first tribal meetings and festivals being at what we try to copy now, organizing festivals, except we do it without respecting nature and often one another. It would be beautiful really to bring the voices of these small cultures indeed to the mainstream, and it would be brilliant to convince the big players to be on our side as well. How do we do this?
It's a very interesting question, because that's the problem of each capital. When we discuss about, you know, politics, we discuss from the perspective of Warsaw. But the genius was born in the province, died in the capital. And this is very important. This case of Sami people, this is voice of province. This is not voice from Oslo. This is very important situation. We should come back to the real roots of our democracy. That's the idea of the democratizations of energy, democratizations of technology. That's the idea of the presumed market. Too many stupid idea was created by the politics because they believe life is very easy, technology, this. No. This is very important to discuss, to promote local culture. This is the real life. The local artists, they know much better, and they should promote also local culture. This is very important. When we discuss about aspect of the decarbonizations of big music festival, who organized this? Local people. At the end of the day, these local people, they should agree to organize that. If you create too many pollutions, next year they not agree. This is very important. And from that point of view, if show business will be in the hand of the big TV station, they organize festival, this is not this way. That's very important, this festival like this. This is the real value. We need to create positive energy, democratizations of energy, democratizations of technology, and democratizations also music. You know, this business landscape. Yeah? This is very important. If you watch the TV, yeah, you see that this, you know, policy which created by the people from the business, not real needs, not real customer of this culture. And that will be important to change our perception, to change and to come back to real voice of the people and the democracy. And again, democratization, energy, everything. This is the best weapon against of the stupid people from the each capital.
It's very interesting because I'm also this year part of a project called the European Music Business Task Force, and we're 12 people from different European countries selected to cope with the problems of the European music industry. And one of the problems in general, which was mentioned many times by most of the participants, is that the big players take over and that we should give back the power to the hands of the smaller musicians or the mid-scale musicians. I mean, and the conversation was just in the context of the music industry, but it has an impact, and of course the advantages also in the context of the environment. The fact that it's going better in Norway than it's going in Poland, do you feel that your music industry is more democratic?
I don't think I can answer that question directly, really. What we are seeing is a lot of initiatives taken by individuals. So in the techno and electronic music scene, a few years back, everybody wanted to be a DJ. Now everybody wants to be a festival organizer or a club organizer. So there's very much a spirit of wanting to do things. But then on the flip side of that is you also need to keep the audience and your organization safe, which is not always the case. Indeed, it can be a real problem. And again, it's also back to everything being costly. So actually, a part of our sustainability definition in Monument is: can we keep on going? Are we financially viable? Because and that's really it's a core issue, because there are three sources to income in a festival. It's ticket sales, it's funding, and it's bar sales, essentially. And people drink much less, and people go less to events, and funding is hard to get. So to me, that's a key issue, a key concern to everything that we do, and it challenges the sustainability of any larger operation, and in that sense I define Monument as a larger organizer, at least in Norwegian terms. And then smaller organizers, they come and go, they're not really concerned about those things, they just want to have fun. But to whether it's more democratic, I don't really know.
Yeah, maybe the fact that they can, just pick up this work and do it. Maybe that fact itself proves that it is, because I'm not sure if it's like that over here. But maybe it actually is, because I don't actually think that the problem in Poland is not the one with the smaller events. It's really the one with the bigger events.
Yeah, and there, I mean, you can make some conscious choices, and that's who you partner up with. So, for example, Monument, we don't have sponsors, and that's a deliberate decision. So we don't have sponsors, because once you agree to have sponsors, you agree to something else. Yeah. You cannot fully be what you want to be. So, say Red Bull, we will never cooperate with Red Bull, for example. And Red Bull is one of the larger international organizations who take over big portions of the cultural life, in particular within music. They take over festivals, they take over studios, they do all sorts of things, and we don't want to be part of that. And then we see they eat their way in, and they consume larger bits, and many other big actors do that. So, and it's a strong force. I don't really see it as threatening, because that's not really something that is appealing to us anyway. We have our own values. I mean, we are very strongly bonded, the audience, the artists, and we meet each other everywhere we go. Even here, we have so many friends, and it's such a good way to meet people. So it's very physical community. That's not really too touched with those stronger financial forces. But still, we also need to survive. We need to make money as well to be sustainable. So, yeah.
Maybe one important comment. We use the concept of the democratization. That means not depend from the government. This is very important. As you mentioned, not depend also from the big business, like the Red Bull. This is the real aspect of the democratization. That's from that point of view, I think the voice of local people, independent people, like Jerzy Owsiak and his initiative, he's independent from the government. It's very important. And I think from that point of view, the real artist, the real voice, the real important voice of music, it's always, win, because this is the real value. And I don't like any directions from the Minister of Energy, or even from Brussels. Did you know what is the now form of Eurovision Festival? Let's come back to 1980 and the voice of this Norwegian people and the real song. And that's the very important questions. As a taxpayer, I'm ready to pay for that kind of culture, to allocate by some clerks from the Minister of Culture. I don't know. Where is the real value? Who decides that this concert will be important and this will be less important? Yeah? And I like so much be independent from also this kind of corporations like Red Bull, but also from the government. This is the democracy. That's also future of the technology. Yeah? I'm from the organization which is from Bialystok. I'm proud from that. They not should create, huge headquarters in Warsaw. It's possible to create real innovation, technology, music, art here.
Bartłomiej is nodding.
It's very interesting. I mean, I see the parable again to the energy system. I'm the energy guy, so the democratization and decentralization of the music scene or the festivals you said are the big companies organizing, similar with the energy system, which is very centralized and not really democratized. So let's give the possibility to the prosumer. Let's give the possibility to the humans to take care about the energy. So the concept of like energy communities, installing the decentralized renewable energy sources, which are mostly spreaded, and then they are increasing the independency of those communities of the supply on the local level, and also they can also have some also economic advantages. The companies as well. More of the companies now in Poland are thinking or already investing in their own photovoltaic on the rooftops. Also some storage technologies in order to stabilize the volatility. They are still connected to the grid, but I wouldn't want to make you the energy lectures, but the centralized grid is that you have a big generators, transmission, distribution lines, and the customers on the bottom. But those renewable decentralized sources are installed on the bottom. So sometimes you have like a bidirectional power flows from the bottom to the top, and you need to manage this. And that's why we need to also digitalize this process, this system. So we need to pour more IoT technologies, more artificial intelligence in order to safely run the system and safely guarantee the sustainable supply for the humans, but also giving them the rights to participate in it, to invest in their own technologies, to make these microgrids, to make these virtual power plants. So I think it's there's maybe some similarities in at least in the wording, decentralization and democratization of the system of the life.
And when you say we need to, you mean like who? The politicians?
I will not be sure if I will believe only on that. I mean, through our initiative, I mean, of course, there are some challenges, maybe some boundaries. So we need to, like a drop is it's destroying the concrete. Then we need to do it. But for sure, I mean, this is in our own hands. So we need to find out the ways in the regulations and the legislations in order to do it. But the company Grzegorz mentioned, Electrum, is doing it. I mean, installing a lot of renewables, doing innovative projects in different technologies in order to show it is possible. Of course, there are challenges, but if you will, my colleague Pio is always saying, if you don't have a delta, like the old Greek said, if you don't have a change, then you don't have a progress. So you need to have a delta. It's a risk, but you need to take this risk.
So I wanted to add to what you said, that you mentioned that you need to have finance to be sustainable, and I think it's really important to underline at this panel, at this festival, that this festival does its scenography from it's circular ones. They have a big magazine of stuff that they're using all over. And this, when I'm sitting here and listening to you, I think it's quite astonishing that this sustainability of the festival was brought by the creativity, rooted in not enough finance. And I feel that sometimes when we talk about sustainability, ecological solutions, we think of doing stuff, we reach really high to have a high level, high-end forms of acting. But in a way, like the Up To Date shows that you don't have to have a big bag of money to do stuff that are sustainable. You have to be creative, open-minded, and like stick to the rules you set yourself. So the sound system that I hope that everyone that are here today or yesterday at the festival, that you're listening to the music from, is also made from circular elements. So I don't really agree with the fact that you have to have big finance to be sustainable. I understand what you're coming from, but I feel that it's a balance, and it can be done even if there's not enough budget. So and I also want I'll use my mic moment. I also wanted to answer what you mentioned. I feel that idea of totally independent festivals from everything is a beautiful idea, but from my experience, from my field of music, which is independent electronic music, we are in Poland, where independent electronic music is not the main genre that people are listening to. So if we would only refer to the income from our listeners, I think it would be really hard to sustain organizations and to do events. And I feel that I actually have a question to you later. Is club culture in Norway seen as a culture? Because in Poland it's not. So when the pandemic hit, the club culture in Poland was really deeply cut. It basically was a cutthroat for most of promoters and organizers, and a lot of big festivals that are internationally renowned as well didn't get the funding or support. Not to mention that clubs are not seen as cultural institutions, so they received no support as a cultural institution. So I feel that it's a really beautiful idea. Maybe we're getting there very slowly, but I feel that it's also the responsibility of a country and our government to support the culture, because culture itself should be protected, and it shouldn't be also dependent on trends and on what is now on, because it's different. There is a difference between what's now in the trends and what the culture is. So yeah, I feel that it would be, in a perfect world, I would see that we have a government funding that acknowledges what we're doing as a culture, and yeah, maybe in the future, who knows?
Yes, I can only add to that one thing, referring to what you said earlier in a different context, but that the power is in our hands. That also means that we can vote, and that's. I'm just going to leave it there. And the second thought is, I recorded an album not that long ago, which was a form of a protest, really commenting on the social and political situation, and it came out late 2021, and it was very hard to work with it in those terms exactly. Like, it was commenting on the fact that the president is skiing instead of taking care of whatever needs to be taken care of. There is a silent track on it, which is 30 seconds of silence, which was the way I thought was the best way to comment on the way the First Lady handled the protests of women on the streets of Warsaw, and so on and so forth. So, I mean, obviously, I would not be getting any public money for that. Also, however, it was not very easy to get partners for it because it's controversial. So, like, companies don't really want to work with that. And I already then started thinking how difficult it is to be actually in that place, like trying to strive, without both the governmental help and any, business help. It's almost impossible.
Yeah, you raise a good. It's a tragic story, and I'm sorry that you had to go through it. But you touched a good point that the system itself of distributing the finance is wrong. And this is something that we should think about and more often, I think, because this money that is being distributed between the entities is basically our tax money. So we should think about how it's. You applied for funding and you had the whole system procedure. You had to have points, etc. I also applied for various projects, and I always was just under the line, especially in past years. So this is also like. The question of how the funds are being distributed, who decides it, and why this looks like that. This procedure looks like that. Maybe we should think about procedures that are more independent or clear. Because I don't know what's your experience, but I didn't get my when I got my. The amount of points I got from my project, I didn't get the opinion feedback. Why, and had no feedback why it looked like that. So, and I really believed that my project was worth the funding I was applying for. So, yeah, that's maybe another topic to think about in the future.
Halvard, I saw you wanted to say something also.
Yeah, I almost understood there was a question for me here. But first I wanted to thank you for challenging the way I expressed our definition of sustainability. Now, it wasn't all about the money. It was also about having people volunteer and stay on for many, many years. Because, I mean, if you cannot pay people for their efforts, like salary for what they do, then you need to rely on volunteering. And people love to volunteer, but only to a certain extent. And the more work you put onto people for volunteering, and for the longer time you do it, it's harder to motivate. And that's also part of the sustainability. We always want to be able to conclude at the end of a festival that we really, really want to do it again. Mm-hmm. That's part of our success measure. And if we also get a high enough portion of the volunteers to say the same, then we feel very, very lucky and very happy that we have actually managed this in a good and sustainable way. But money is also a part of it, obviously. And it's not that we don't get any money, but it took us quite a long time to crack the code. Mm-hmm. You said something about the application process. It's really, really, really hard. We were so close to giving up, and we are getting smaller amounts, like petty cash, but it's something. And to us, it's also kind of a sign of acceptance from the cultural environment. I mean, the higher up people in the cultural world. As to whether club culture in Norway is also seen as culture, I think it has been moving a bit, but largely, no. So for a few months, we had a cultural minister who was very supportive of what we were doing. We actually had a festival in Oslo in April, where we also had a similar panel of discussions where the cultural minister opened it and expressed strong support for electronic music and the culture of the electronic music. Unfortunately, she needed to resign yesterday.
No.
So, but we're hoping that the seed has been sown and that this can continue to grow.
Yeah, I can't imagine happening in Poland now.
Yeah, that was what my oh dear was about. I just saw this in front of my eyes and was like, okay, crazy.
Yeah, we're actually in a quite hard situation with distributing in the culture and in general and politics now. So, yeah, we don't have to go there.
Just a quick look at in this direction, because we're very open for questions and comments. And at this point, I would want to ask, maybe you would like to say something, actually, any of you. or I'll just leave this with you and you can think about it and we'll come back. Oh yeah, yeah, great.
So just a few words about me. Mr. Lombardi, I am also a scientist. And I have some comments, but before to explain my comments, I want to be clear. I agree on what you said, totally agree. But I have different buts. We have seen today that Norway has been presented as an environment-friendly country, allowing to organize festival, I would say, sustainable. They are sustainable festivals. I think that there is some paradox. So you can do that because, and you can avoid to receive funding from sponsoring like Red Bull because you have funds, money from other sources. So Norway is a very rich people, a rich country. So most of the money that you receive comes from fossil business. One moment, now come to the question. I believe we must be democratic. I think that instead to organize one festival more in Norway, it's not better to share the money that you have organizing one festival more in Poland, because Poland also helps you to give you money. We must buy, I would say, natural gas at 500 euros from Norway. So that money, that extra profit that you got, maybe it was better to use for organizing a festival here in Poland. I think that is the first comment to you. But please,
let me answer that directly. I don't know what I've said. Apparently, it seems that we earn a lot of money on our festivals. We have never earned a dime. We have never lost money, but we have never come out with profit either. So we would gladly share any surplus, but as of yet, we don't have any surplus to share. So I don't know what I said. We receive minor funding, only minor. I guess 1% of our total budget is stately funding. 1%.
Okay, you did not say that. Okay, anyway, I did not know. The second comment is to you. You say that we should organize, or you think to the solution, very sustainable solution, like to use train for transportation. But in my point of view, if we suggest such a solution, we have to have an holistic view. Mm-hmm. Suggesting to use train in Poland maybe is not the most environment-friendly solution. So therefore, we also should also consider the right solution, allowing to save anthropogenic CO2.
Yeah, but I agree. It's something that I also should underline. Thank you for bringing that. But I think that's why we're on this panel, that I hope it's going to change in the future. And the coal energy is going to disappear. But if you look at the amount of public that is coming to a festival and everyone would take a car, it's worse than everyone sitting in a train at once. So I feel that it's still worth to propose the train, and especially for international connections, that you can just resign from taking a plane going in a really different direction that you're actually going to. So
for sure.
Yeah.
But what I think that we should work in parallel. From one side, your suggestion is the best one, and the other side, we must push the politics, like Dr. Arendarski said, and say, we want to have most environmental solutions, but we must also work in changing the energetic infrastructure. So both the solutions should be pushed, and also awareness that if we use only train in this situation is not the best one, we should communicate that. Therefore, the politics can understand that we must also work on the other side. That should be a very transparent communication.
I think I have a comment to this as well. I mean, the nice discussion. I like it. Also, you mentioned it about Norway. Let's say getting richness also through exporting the fossil resources and so on. Cleverly investing, we need to tell that, okay, locally they are very renewable, that's true, but we need to also consider, this is the problem and the paradigm that about the rights for the underdeveloped countries to have, let's say, the same life standard as we have. I mean, we are from wealthy countries, Poland, West Europe, and so on. But if every person in India will have 2 cars in the family, then the earth is not having enough resources to hold it, or all the African countries. So we need to show the example that we are also efficient, we are sustainable in order to, in the future, to give the rights for everyone on the earth to have this, let's say, wealthiness and to keep the earth still alive. So for sure, we need to do something. We cannot blame only the things which happened in the past, but we need to think about the future and do it in the clever way. Coming back also to the point that you said that the money for the particular, let's say, the cultural events or with some different maybe mission or different background are not wealthy sponsored like the other ones, which are maybe more on the line with the governmental line. I think that this is about the democracy, this is about the diversity. It's similar in the energy system. We will not stick to the one technology, but the different technologies needs to have the same right to enter the system. So once we have renewables, PV and the solar and the wind, maybe in the other places we have a geothermal, we will have the electric cars in the big cities, but in the agriculture we have still the combustion machines and so on. So there will be, I think, not like a golden solution to solving all the problems, but we need to be democratic and let everyone access the market. So and this will be, let's say, then on the end refer it to what the people wants, what the people wants to use. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree, and I think it's like for some back info. If you go through the history of various, let's say, I'll just talk about independent electronic music festivals in the past. With getting the funding, like each year there was less and less, and on the list of the entities, I totally agree that it should be democratic. It should be the system should be clear, and everyone should have an access. But actually, now we're living in a reality, and I'm speaking only from my perspective of an independent electronic music world, that it's inaccessible for us, and you could see that there is a vast majority of entities that are existing for a year or a couple months and are in a line of the cultural ministry politics, that they are getting the funding for their new events. So it's a complex problem, but I think that from my ideal way of thinking, if let's work on a clear system of distributing funds.
From the perspective of Music Declares Emergency, I would like to maybe mention a few recommendations, especially in the context of this conversation we just had here, because sometimes it's, train works in one situation, and maybe renting a van sometimes is even more sustainable and definitely a faster way to get there. And in the end, if you, for example, implement one of our recommendations, which is using the carbon footprint calculators for your travels, that's basically like preparing a budget of the event. You put it in the calculator and you can see, when you replace the train with the car, what the footprint is in the end. And you can also only do so much. It's small steps that you can start with. So you can choose whether, this time you choose the train, the other time you took the car, but instead you do something else that will in total lower the footprint. Maybe I'll actually, if I can ask you to start the the Music Declares Emergency Climate Pact. I'll just show you a part of the document. We'll just very quickly go through this. This is explaining what the crisis is, which we know very well. Music Declares Emergency has a lot of big names on board, and we have this project called No Music on a Dead Planet. So that's why you'll see a lot of musicians in this T-shirt. This is what Music Declares Emergency is. An organization started in the United Kingdom in London, and now it has more than 10 chapters across Europe and also outside of Europe. And it's very interesting how different. It's something that Halvard mentioned in the beginning, that in Oslo, the trash is being recycled and segregated, and in the north it's not. And that's what we experience looking at what the different chapters in different countries have to work with, because some are now at the point of discussion whether they should lobby to the government. The other ones teach the musicians to write hospitality writers and encourage organizers of festivals to stop putting plastic bottles in the events. And in Brazil, they are teaching the people to segregate the trash. So it's a completely different level of what people are working with in different territories. And the Climate Pack, which is a PDF that you can download online if you ever need it, go ahead and do it. It has different chapters written in the context of different players in the music industry. So there's a page for artists, page for music lovers, page for event organizers, and so on and so forth. We'll move to the event organizers, but this page for artists has, in point 7, which is Don't Fly As Much, a link to an Equilibrium travel carbon calculator. Equilibrium is a charity from Great Britain, and it works in close cooperation with Music Declares Emergency and also another charity called Julie's Bicycle, which I also strongly recommend to you if you are interested in checking some resources. They have a lot of free resources online, like hospitality writers, all kinds of documents, planning for events, and so on and so forth. And also this carbon calculator, which I have tested. Also Impala, the Association of Independent Music Companies, European music independent companies, has created in the collaboration with Julie's Bicycle a different travel carbon calculator, which also works, and they're developing it further. Have you ever used a carbon footprint calculator for planning your travels?
Yeah, I used it for planning travels, and also in the past when I was involved in a different festival, we counted the travels of artists, and then there was a plan to, I think it was because I then wasn't working anymore there, they planted forest to balance it. So, but it was a huge amount, like really, it was a huge amount. Even, like there's so many, because there was a trend at one moment, I think, that everyone was kind of counting carbon footprint and deciding to plant a forest for it. But I also read somewhere that there's not enough ground on Earth to balance it this way. So, yeah, but yes, I did it, and it's quite astonishing.
Do you recommend it to people coming to the festival, or use it for your own at Monument, like a carbon footprint calculator, or you don't work with one?
Yeah, certainly. I don't really know much about this initiative. We have been working with some other organizers who actually established a standard for how to work with sustainability on festivals. Mm-hmm. So this standard was completed too late for us to take it into full consideration for our festival this year, but we're totally going to embrace that in our next festivals. Okay. And this too, I mean, this looks great, and it looks like a great resource for us as organizers, but also, like you're showing here, for the artists to raise more awareness on what they can do.
Yeah, I'll jump to this is the touring and live event part. And mainly Equilibrium is pointed out here as the organization that is worth checking out. They have the 2 links that you can see marked are the sustainable travel guides for artists and the music industry, and green travel and transport guides. And the 5 tips that they mainly mention, a lot of it we already talked about. The first one is measuring your carbon footprint, and I mean you can contact Equilibrium. There is an email address over there as well. But just on the website, the carbon footprint calculator is very easy to and very useful, definitely. Communicate and collaborate. I mean, that's also what we're doing right now. We're talking about it, and I think that's very important. And being vocal about it for many artists, it has shown that it works. Make a sustainable transport plan, and there's also an action plan template for events that you can download and just do exactly that. You know, put it in planning where you can change, where you can like I said earlier, sometimes you can't go all green straight away, but you can make small steps slowly. Influence audience travel. We also mentioned that, and a lot of festivals are already doing that. And also that's for festivals, but also even for single events. If a venue works with a ticket selling partner and they inform the ticket selling partner about the best ways to get to the venue, then already when people buy tickets, they received from the ticket company the information how to best get to the venue, and it's a very simple way to improve it. And balance unavoidable emission with climate investments. That's something that, you know, we were talking a lot about, you know, the economic aspect and Poland being in a tough place. But in some cases, I think it can work because, of course, this is, you know, has been written by the UK chapter, and the UK situation is a bit different. But still, I think it's worth considering. So that there are other pages with, you know, for record labels about printing merch. Again, I mean, it's put this way because, I mean, we think that venues don't have to deal with merch, but in the context of festivals, very much so. So there are also things here that we can work with. Do we see banking refers very much to, you know, not to Poland, because you don't have a website where you can go and switch your bank to a greener bank. But I mean, I think the regulations are going that way, so maybe soon we all will have to do that. So just to mention for the, you know, we're getting close to the end of the conversation. So just to leave you with some practical tips and places on the web where you can go and download some actual materials if you would want to use them for your event. We have 5 minutes left, so that's the second time when I'm going to turn this way and ask you whether you have any comments or questions. I can come down to, you know, even way to the end of the room and reach out with the microphone for whoever would want to say something. Okay. Yeah. That was very close.
So, if I can, of course. I like your indicator, so you calculate the CO2 as indicator of sustainability. If I can suggest you to not limit only on CO2, but to consider also other things, to have some kind of a multi-criteria approach. So, for example, using resources, how much water you need for organizing a festival, how much paper have you used, how much plastic. So, using CO2 may be not so much robust, because in the scientific community, you know that we are living in global warming time. Nobody can discuss on it. If the global warming depends on the anthropogenic CO2 emissions, we are not so much sure. And therefore, your indicator may be not so robust. But if you use a multi-criteria approach, you say we want to be sustainable. We take in consideration CO2. We take in consideration the water consumption, the plastic, paper, I don't know how many other criteria. Then you have a very robust indicator for sustainability. and nobody can tell you anything.
I can add something to that.
Yeah.
I mean, we are now in the particular case of music and festival making more sustainable, which is very important. I mean, you are doing a very good education. I think the task for you are having mostly the very young audience, and so you are educating also those people during this kind of action. The impact may be on the global system. We start from the global perspective, so maybe you can move back to the global perspective. It's maybe not that high as, for example, decarbonizing the industry, which will have much more impact on the carbonization of the whole system. Of course, we need to go for the low-hanging fruits, but you are showing that also the higher-hanging fruits are also very important. I mean, this is I think all the transition process is big. It's containing of the small puzzles, and you are putting those small puzzles. Sometime the big puzzles wants to follow up, but on the end the target should be common. So I like pretty much the initiative you make, and I think there are a lot of scalability and transferability to the other sectors of our life. I mean, on the end, we need to also look in the mirror and ask ourselves. I mean, could we save something? Could we go more sustainable? So it's important, I think.
Thank you. And that's why some of the pages are actually very similar, because I mean, for a music fan and for the artist and for a music manager, for a label, a lot of these things, and for any human being, a lot of these points could be, the same. So, yeah.
Thank you very much. It's a very important indicator. It's obligations for the show business, for the energy sector, for all of us, because 45,000 people in this country died because this fossil sector. 45,000 people. This is the size city like Kołobrzeg. Can you imagine? 45,000 people. There is no time. This is the reason why I'm in the energy sector, because this is my obligation. This is the reason about you show business, why you need these indicators. Because 45,000 people, these people, they have no voice. Mm-hmm. They not will be customer of the culture. Mm-hmm. And the question is, how we change this? That's the beginning of the basic questions of this debate. Mm-hmm. This is obligations for artists. This is the obligations for scientists. This is obligations for the energy sector. This is the end. 45,000 people, city of Kołobrzeg, each year. Can you imagine?
Yeah. Talking about how to do it and real change, because we're really almost out of time, I would just like to do around this very final question. If we're talking real change, what would be the very first step to begin? What would you say? One sentence. I mean, I would say one word, but let's not go this crazy. One sentence.
Just start doing. I really like the speak up and do. So I think that's...
Speak up, yeah. Grzegorz.
Let's do it very fast, very quickly. And let's create one community of the good people, good idea, of the democratizations and the real change. This is not important. You are from the energy sector, you are from the education sector, you are from the show business. This is our obligation. This is obligations of our generations. This is very important for our children, because we rent this land from the future generations. This is our obligation. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think we would want to start to measure our footprint as a next step, because right now we're kind of blind. We know we are doing some things that are good, but we don't really know the impact or what we should aim for, because we don't have a baseline. We should start to establish a baseline and then move from there.
Yeah, if I can comment on that just very quickly, because I had a very interesting experience. I split up with a part of my team because they really wanted me to print a CD, and I measured of the footprint of different types of carriers of music, and I measured the digital footprint, the CD footprint, and the vinyl footprint, which is also the digital footprint is a whole different conversation, and people keep on forgetting that also weighs its, it's tons. But I decided not to print the CDs because of that, and I didn't find the agreement with my team. They really thought, that for the business it's better to print it, and we had a massive disagreement. So sometimes it's important to do it, but it also, I'll say it the delicate way, generates conversations. Yeah, Bartłomiej.
I would say that everyone has let's say the opportunity to make this world better. So you are doing it in the music sector, and it's a brilliant things which we are doing. We are trying to do this in the energy sector, and it's good. Everyone has different impact, different tasks, and we need to share our vision, and we need to follow this. Yeah.
Yes, let's do it, people. Thank you very much for having us.